Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to go ahead and begin by introducing myself and then orienting you to what I'm going to be spending the next part of our day talking about. So I'm Allison Briscoe-Smith. I've been working with kids throughout my whole career, specializing in kids with trauma and also children with ADHD as well. That will come, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But met Greg and also got an opportunity to work at the Trauma Recovery Center and San Francisco General Hospital at the Child Trauma Research Project. And it was there that I was really trained in domestic violence and working with domestic violence in young children. And have continued to provide services and training and research on that population. And have spent the past, I dabbled a little bit in working with foster care through agency in Oakland. Then went into academia for about 4 or 5 years, and there did a lot of teaching on family violence, child abuse, and also a number of other things, mostly child-focused. And then most recently have become the director of the Center for the Vulnerable Child at Children's Hospital Oakland. And that's where we're focusing mostly on families that experience homelessness and also foster care. Throughout all of this, I've had research that's focused on trauma and ADHD, on children in foster care, and most recently on commercially sexually exploited minors, so girls in particular who are being prostituted. So a breadth of experience focused on kids and kids in trauma, and also the majority of my work, both clinically and also research-wise, has been on brown kids, on African American or Latino kids too. So I do have an interest in focusing on cultural issues as well. But much of my language is going to be really about young kids for a number of different reasons. My specialty in terms of training in domestic violence was with kids between the ages of 3 to 6. I've worked kind of around that as well. And also for narcissistic reasons, I have a 4-month-old and I have a 2-year-old. So my world is really about young children. I am going to try to, because I'm assuming that for those of you in the room and out in the world out there, have worked with kids the whole broad continuum. But if you find me kind of reverting back to young children, that's why. So I think that's both the strength and a limitation. I'm also going to tell you about why the research supports an interest and a focus on young kids in particular in thinking about domestic violence. So that's a little bit about kind of my background, and I'm sure I'll talk more about me as we go. But what I'm going to be spending the next part of our afternoon talking about is exposure. I know you've already been rooted in the exposure of domestic violence in terms of how many adults experience domestic violence, but I want to bring that to children. We're also going to talk about the impact of domestic violence on children. Really, we're going to talk a lot about what it looks like, and the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to really pick on post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm going to nerd out a little bit and go off on PTSD, but it's really in the interest of presenting a picture about what the implications of trauma are for children. We're then going to use all of that when we have a good picture about what trauma looks like for kids to think about how would we assess for both the impact of domestic violence on children, but whether or not children are experiencing domestic violence.